Now let's move into the least improved teams or teams that have even taken a couple steps back this offseason. First one I want to talk about is a team out there in the desert, and it's not the Cardinals, it is the Las Vegas Raiders because they lose most of their offensive line. They overpay for Kenyon Drake. They hands down overpay for Kenyon Drake. And they cut their best safety in Lamarcus Joyner. John Gruden, what you doing, man?
Yeah, what he's doing is he's losing his whole offensive line, so that's
Whoa,
not
sorry,
great.
sorry. At least they re-signed Marcus Mariota, the most important piece on that team. So gotta give them some credit there.
Yeah, I mean they can look forward to that one half of football where he looks okay and think they might get he might think he might get a big contract in the offseason. I don't know how much that does for you. I think Kenyon Drake is the most overrated running back in the NFL. I don't think he's good at all. Lamarcus Joyner was consistently one of the best safeties in the league. And just losing your biggest offensive weapon, which unfortunately was their offensive line last year, and losing Rodney Hudson, losing Trent Brown. I have no idea what they're doing. Doesn't make any sense. If they got any sort of substance out of that, if they used that money in a different way,
At
I would
least
understand it, but
they
they
re-signed
didn't. They
Richard
didn't replace
Incognito.
it at all.
No.
So I don't get it.
Yeah, no, Raiders once again. John Gruden proving that the only way he can win championships is if he gets traded and put into a hand-picked team that's already going to win the Super Bowl with or without him.
Yep.
Still, when he signed that 10-year, $100 million contract, I said it was going to be an absolute bust, totally overrated. And every year he continues to prove me right. Thank you very much, John Gruden. I appreciate you for doing that. The next team that I want to actually say here is one that maybe other people might not put in this category, but just given kind of like a lackluster off season that they've had so far, the fact that they've had some good resignings, they had a pretty good trade, but they're a contender, they're a playoff team, borderline Super Bowl contender, but they haven't really made that push to really put them over the edge. That is the Indianapolis Colts, and they re-sign almost essentially their entire offense. They get that trade for Carson Wentz, but who is an improvement at that position, but they haven't really done much else there. I would like for the Colts to made like a bigger push this offseason to really bring in a playmaker, but I guess they're content with saying Pat, so I respect that, but at the same time, they should have done a little more during the first week or two of off season or their
Yeah,
free agency.
I don't understand their allotment of money there to the receiving core. I just think T.Y. Hilton for anything over, 5 mil a year is an egregious overpay. And also when you have a guy when you put so much of your reputation at stake by trading a first round pick for a guy like Carson Wentz. I mean, what's most likely going to end up being a first round pick with all the incentives in that with the conditions. But
Yep.
when you do that and you don't make a push to go get a very gettable Kenny Galladay or a very gettable Juju Smith-Schuster, and you just instead take that money where you could have used it to them, numbers match up, and you bring in back T.Y. Hilton. I don't understand it at all. He looks washed. He gets hurt all the time. He doesn't have the same explosion. He's not a great one-on-one player like these other guys were. Carson Wentz is not a guy that's just going to pick you apart with accuracy down the field. He needs big plays. That is not T.Y. Hilton anymore. I don't understand what they were doing this offseason. It seems like they didn't really have a plan, or their plan was just get Carson Wentz, then figure everything out later. Very different than last year when they brought in a DeForest Buckner and they drafted Jonathan Taylor, and you saw the direction of where this team was headed. But now it just looks like, okay, we're just going to have to bank on Carson Wentz. If he's good, we look good. And if he's bad, we're cooked. So it just seems like a lot to put into Carson Wentz.
That's really what they're doing here. They're still talent, like we said, so we'll see if they're able to make a move. Maybe like a last one. Maybe they have a good draft. Who knows? And then the last team I want to talk about is staying within that division in the AFC South. That is the Tennessee Titans, because not only do they absolutely overpay for Bud Dupree, they lose their a key to that offense. Of course, he's not the wide receiver one, but Corey Davis was really important there for them down the stretch, and they've had an absolutely lackluster free agent period, kind of like the Colts, where they haven't really done much. At least the Colts are able to resign all their talent. The Titans haven't been able to do that. I don't like what they're doing there, especially because they were a really good team last year. They were that playoff team borderline Super Bowl contending team, similar to the Colts. All the Colts are, or they have the edge on them. I don't know what they're doing. Similar situation to the Colts. I just thought they were going to do something a little more than this.
And the interesting thing is I think at least the Titans had an excuse. They didn't have a ton of cap space.
Mm-hmm.
They did most of their spending last year to
Mm-hmm.
re-sign Ryan Tannehill and to re-sign Derrick Henry. So they didn't have a ton of cap space to work with. They at least, I mean, I don't think the loss of Corey Davis is as impactful as anyone thinks it is. I think he's a very boomer bust player that you can easily replace in the draft. And Bud Dupree at least gives them a name, a pass rush name. You get
Knowing the
that
times that
Jadavian.
he'll just end up injured a couple weeks into the season.
Yeah, I mean that's what happened last year with Clowney. So I guess they have that. They know how to respond to that. So, yeah, I don't really understand. I mean, the thing is they were just hamstrung by the cap. So I don't think they have a huge excuse as to why they or as to if they could have done anything different. I think what they should have done maybe is instead of spending all your money on Bud Dupree, maybe spread it out a little more. Maybe you bring in a guy like Kerry Hyder or Romeo Okwara or someone that's a little less expensive
Yank
to fill some
Ngakwe
of that.
was much cheaper.
Exactly. So you spend some on that, and then maybe you bring in a secondary playmaker to opposite AJ Brown instead of having to now probably fill him in the draft. So it's interesting what they did, but I can see at least the reasons why they did it because of the cap issues, whereas the Colts can't understand it at all.